Welcome to the Monday Morning Mixtape, the only podcast that music does. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about Trent Reznor and we're going to be deep diving into the downward spiral. Hopefully we'll come out of it okay at the end. Show. Laura's choice this week. And Laura went with 9 Inch Nails and the Downward Spiral. So, yeah. So we'll be talking a bit about Trent Reznor at the start of the show. Then we're going to have a bit of a deep dive into the Downward Spiral. And near the end of the show, we're going to have some recommendations for similar kind of like artists and industrial records that tweak our coils, so to speak. So anyway, Laura, Trent Reznor, is he a plasterer, a builder? What kind of tradesman is he?
He obviously enjoys hammering things in with these 9 Inch Nails. But yes, you refer to 9 Inch Nails. Trent Reznor basically is 9 Inch Nails, really, I suppose, up until I think something ridiculous like about, 2016 or something like that. Maybe should help
people who don't know who 9 Inch Nails are, what 9 Inch Nails is. What kind of a band is it?
Industrial. Well, he doesn't actually like describing himself as industrial, alternative rock, I suppose, or something like that. But as I was saying, up until around 2016, he was the only member of 9 Inch Nails until Atticus Ross was formally inducted into it. But Trent Reznor basically just decided to do his own sort of music project, I suppose, really. Alternative rock, hard rock, metal, heavy metal, industrial, progressive rock, prog metal, whatever you'd like to call it yourself, I suppose, really. That's sort of the various descriptors that have been attached onto it. Some people actually even kind of said that he might have had a hand actor part in like forming dubstep, if you believe it or not.
Yeah, no, maybe. Yeah, I think 9 Inch Nails' influence with various things.
Yeah, in particularly on Year Zero, there's one or two tracks that people kind of went, oh, it's kind of early, kind of like progenitor of dubstep. So I could kind of see that in some of the breakdowns. But we'll get into that. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit further along as we discuss it. But I suppose we might as well start at the start. Where better place to start?
His name is Trent Bartholomew J. Actually, you did the Trent Man. That was his first song, actually. People don't realise that he wrote the Bart Man.
Indeed, yes. Well, actually, his name is Michael Trent Reznor.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, there you go. So there's a little tidbit for you that you probably didn't know. MT, yes, there you go. But yes, Trent.
Is Reznor his real name?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
right.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, his I don't know, was it his dad or his granddad? They actually own some sort of air conditioning radiator type firm or something like that, like Reznor Conditioners or something like that.
Sure, they'd have to have money for him, because I'm a big fan of Trent Reznor as well as you are, and as well, like when I got into playing electronic music recently, heavily influenced by Trent Reznor, and kind of who isn't to a certain point, I suppose, if you're into metal anyway. But it's looking at documentaries with him and little things that he does, because he always used Moogs, but he had like
Moog, pronounce it correctly. Moog.
From when he was relatively young. So you need a bit of money to... A
little bit of money behind that.
Yeah.
Well, it's...
Although he did work for...
Well, that's it, yeah. He's it's not as if he had a
record studio.
A charmed upbringing or anything like that. It's, don't paint it to be overly charmed. His parents divorced when he was quite young, so his grandparents basically kind of brought him up. So he started taking piano lessons quite young. So that's, I suppose, where his interest in that kind of came from, I suppose. And his access, I suppose, to sort of all of that kind of equipment came from, I think he took a janitorial job at a studio, so he could have access to all of this fantastic equipment.
I think he used to work in a record, well, not a record store, in a music, so he could have access to kind of like, say, second-hand and broken things, and I think he used to fix up some of the stuff to get some of the bits and pieces.
Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't as if he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and just got handed thousands of pounds worth of, sort of equipment at a whim kind of thing. He was kind of innovative in his access to things. So I was just like, took a job as a janitor, and it's kind of like, right, okay, well, on the downtime of the studios, can I use the studios in the nighttime when they're not being used? And they went, yeah, have at it. So that was how he managed to actually get recording time in a studio. I mean, that's something that people don't think about doing. It's like people nowadays seem to want to kind of like, right, I'm a music artist, I just want to go in and record stuff. How do I go about doing it? use your brain, kind of.
Well, now you can just, you can record
Yeah, you can do
stuff
it
on
at
your
home,
phone.
I know, yeah. But like back in the day when you could not do stuff like that, you had to go into a recording studio to do it. And it's like, right, okay, just do it this way. And that's sort of the back door into it. You take a lowly kind of a job, not lowly, but you know what I mean? You go in the back door like that and you take a job
Hating
that's
on
not...
janitors now, eh?
Yeah, no, look at me. Yeah, exactly. But you just kind of go in the back door like that and you take a job that's slightly unrelated to it, but it gets you access to all the equipment that you need. And away you go. But yeah, so... from a young age, I suppose he's always musically influenced and all the rest. He was taking his piano lessons. He was in band at school, as far as I know, as well. So he was like,
picture it, yeah.
I think he learned how to play the saxophone. So he's quite a wide ranging ability, I suppose, of various different musical instruments, which came in handy because obviously enough he was in quite a small town, I suppose, so his musical interests didn't necessarily line up with quite a lot of other people. So when he wanted to make music, he was kind of like, hey guys, anyone want to play music with me? And they're like, fuck off, weirdo. So he was like, well, if I want to make music, I got to do it all myself. So he basically went the Prince route and recorded all the musical instruments himself, bar the drums.
That was for 9 Inch. He was in a band prior to 9 Inch.
He was in a lot of different bands. There was like Exotic Birds, and there was like I think Option 30 or something like that. There was a few other different.
Yeah. If anyone wants to laugh if they're into it, just look up Exotic Birds. And they did a TV performance,
which has been recorded and is uploaded to YouTube, and it's very it's almost. I don't want to say new romantic, but that's the feel it kind of gets. It's very of its time.
It's just funny seeing Trent Reznor in the Get Up. Well, the Get Up with a whole lot of them.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's almost like a kind of it's not quite a covers band, but it's like it's to get them exposure and playing in sort of clubs and pubs and stuff like that. But he was in a few different things like that before he kind of went, no, I'm going to play my own music that I like, and off I go. But as I said, he's a few little bands like that first that he kind of tooled around in first before he went, no, go and do my own stuff. I'm going to write my own stuff, and off I go to the studio with me, and away I go on my pretty 8 machine. But so I suppose really, I mean, he kind of, the birth of 9 Inch Nails was way back in sort of the late 80s. 88 I suppose is when the first album really hit big.
89.
Well, that was when it was released. He was recorded in 88. But so he basically put it all together by himself as such, really. In the downtime in the studio, as I said, he went in, recorded it all himself. It was quite pop synth heavy, I suppose. Really, it was quite a catchy, poppy kind of a thing, but it was
a weird mixture of songs. Like
it is. It's very unusual for the time. Anyway, it was like nothing that ever kind of came before it. Really, I suppose it was poppy enough that it landed quite well with MTV, but it was still very heavy in general.
I remember seeing on Headbangers Ball had like a hole when it was released, and I didn't know what I was like, what the fuck?
It's
Even
very
the video
hard to know what to make of it,
because it was, I think it was probably my first exposure to industrial music, so it would have been like, say, 10 or 11 or 12 or something, like, seeing that, I was just like, what the fuck is that? I didn't know, but it was just all the wires in the video, and they looked like they were like from fucking Blade Runner or something.
Yeah.
But then you compare some of the other songs and it, like Down in It, and all, they're more kind of Princey, I think.
They're kind of electronic dance music, kind of, I suppose, is where you could see it coming from, really. I suppose it's very synth driven, very kind of almost disco synth. I don't want to say that, but it is kind of, it's very poppy, it's charty. Looking back on it now, you can say it's charty, it's poppy, because music nowadays you can kind of hear a lot of influence in it, but at the time,
like
absolutely nothing like it.
Yeah,
like, I mean, it blasted onto the scene and people were like, what the fuck is this?
It was like Sin and stuff like that. It was just, and I think because there wasn't, people were always used to like singer-songwriters, and he had Prince but like Prince was a bit of an anomaly, because normal people didn't know that Prince was just writing music by himself, because he always had a load of people around him and stuff, so it looked like Prince was in.
That's, I know, Prince and the new generation, it was like there was always like hundreds of people on the stage basically, and Prince used to basically do that whole thing. He played so many instruments, and it was that kind of whole kind of, I'm doing it all myself kind of a thing.
And played basketball in his normal get up, according to Charlie Murphy.
Indeed. But like, I mean, obviously then Trent Reznor can't play obviously every music live on stage, so in case people are wondering, obviously he brings people on tour with him and all the rest, and he had a kind of a rotating kind of a schema of people that he used to kind of rotate in and out. That
Marilyn Manson was one of them at once. Well, he helped out recording stuff on the EP that came after Pretty Hate Machine. Like, he put a fucking Broken and then the Fixed,
Yeah.
which was actually, he did the remix, didn't he, of Pretty Hate Machine as well, before all that, which was really unusual. Not many people are doing like remixes of their own.
And he tends to do
albums.
that quite a lot with all of his albums. They always tend to get a remix version, and they're always entirely
Very different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not like this kind of like, oh, I'm doing a remix of my song, here it is with just a slightly dancier beat or something like that. They are always, you listen to and you go, that's actually entirely different from the original album. It might as well just be a completely different sort of track that I would listen to. It's the words are the same and that's about it. It's entirely different. The beats are different, the rhythm is different, the sound is different, the musical instruments are different, and it's entirely different beast, entirely different animal. So there's value for money in sort of getting all the remixed albums. They're totally different sort of beasts as such, really, I suppose. But where was I leading to this? Oh yeah, sorry. The rotating cast, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
He has a couple of kind of regulars that he always kind of rotates it.
They're different at the start of it, though. At that point,
Yeah.
they were regulars at that time, but they had like a bit of a falling out, all of them over like Richard Patrick, who would have been kind of like involved with the first one. He ended up going off and forming Filter, and Danny Lohner ended up was playing bass, I think, with him for a long time through. It seemed that the kind of like live set got fixed when they were doing, like, no pun, they were Broken. Wasn't it kind of like on that, which ended up being a very, very different animal, kind of like from Pretty Hate Machine. Was a lot out. It was basically industrial metal.
Pretty much, I suppose. That was and that was the reaction to it, I suppose, because Pretty Hate Machine was a kind of, it really broke through, and it was really poppy and like it was an instant kind of success. And he was kind of tied in, I suppose, really with the record label, and they're like, right, we want this, and we want it over and over and over again. And if anybody is anyway familiar with Trent Reznor, he's very contrarian, and he doesn't, by his own admission, he doesn't like having other people tell him what to do, and he's not necessarily commercially driven as well. He is very much, by his own admission, I'm an artist and I will do what seems right at the time and what creatively feels correct to me. And he even in various interviews is like, I realise that sounds a bit fucking poncy or whatever, but fuck it, I'm an artist and whatever I want to do is whatever I want to do.
What musicians,
Exactly.
that's what we kind of like always.
Yeah, he said,
go
I'm
with
not
that.
an entertainer. It's not like I'm not going to cater to the masses. I care what the fan thinks, but the fan is not going to dictate what I want to do, because then it just becomes some sort of insincere dross. It's like, I will do what I want to do, and if that speaks to the fan, well and good, and if it doesn't, well, it's just a failure or whatever, but it's something that is sincere and comes from the heart. But he was tied in for a certain amount of records to the record label, and they're like insisting that he comes up with something like, well, let's do like something poppy and something that's going to like be commercially successful. And he's like, I will give you Broken, and I will give you something that is like really angry, hard, industrial, grindy guitars. I will layer and layer and layer these really harsh, overdriven guitars. I'm going to make this so obnoxiously harsh to listen to that you're not going to want
And
to
it won
release
an Emmy.
this.
It was like
Pretty much.
massively. It was like so well, kind of like, or a Grammy, kind of like an Emmy. And what was it? Wish was the big one on it. Then Happiness and Slavery, which had the video banned because it had a guy being fisted, wasn't it, or something like that?
Well, it was
no, it was all the sadomasochism kind of like in it, yeah.
It was basically strapped into like kind of a torture machine, basically, until he was basically pleasured and tortured to death and ground up into mincemeat, essentially, which was quite shocking for the time, quite shocking now if you look at it.
But I think it was with that, that kind of cemented 9 Inch Nails is what they were, and started prepping him for kind of like stardom, because it really, really broke him into...
Yeah.
And it really was the birth of, well, not the birth, but I think it was kind of like led the way for industrial metal.
Well, I suppose it kind of paved the whole sort of the kind of the pairing of the sort of the industrial metal, the look that he kind of created, the sort of the steel fist and the kind of the velvet love kind of a thing, where it's sort of like you have this pain, this masochistic kind of sadomasochistic stuff, this sort of gothic horror, torture porn kind of thing. It just sort of, everything sort of meshed in together and sort of gave this whole, almost a kind of a feel to the genre, I suppose, really, where people are like, yeah, industrial metal, and we have this sort of gothic kind of noir horror kind of thing. And, you know, I think it was... He got in trouble at one stage because one of the scenes that he shot for one of the video, it was of him, I can't even remember which one it was, but it was of him sort of basically being left for dead. It was almost kind of like meant to be like the look of a snuff film. And it was of this weather balloon was the last shot. It was like just showing him face down covered in cornstarch and all this, supposedly after being killed. And the weather balloon took the camera away. And of course the weather balloon actually did literally take the camera away, and some farmer found it in his field, and he was like, holy shit, FBI, oh my god. And they were like, this is clearly a corpse rotting away, look at how pale and horrible he is. They're doing this like whole kind of research into it, and somebody was like, that's Trent Reznor, and he's just covered in cornstarch, and he's like, sorry guys, sorry.